You see there is a double affiliation there. I'm already a visiting professor in Manchester, University of Manchester in the north of England, where I will be moving in the summer. But I will be keeping a visiting professorship in Plymouth, so I will be between the two universities for a while. But this work really was all done at the University of Plymouth. Also, I'd like to add that I'm very pleased to have all these talks on ICAP. I don't know if the next talk will also be on ICAP or not. I think you should propose, you French citizens, you should talk to Macron and give it a Legion d'honneur, what do you say, to the ICAP.
Okay.
Because, 3 talks in Lyon on the ICAP. Okay, so my work is nicely online. I don't know if the organizers were meant to do this or not, but it's nicely linked to both Peter's talk, because I work on language, although I focus more on the pre-syntactic aspects of it, but also work on, Gerard, you mentioned intentional reading, and there is now new work on theory of mind. So nice link between the two, slightly different approaches, but of course we like to complement the approaches. So let me start with my standard introduction, which is to constrain and contextualize my approach to my personality. In the sense that I'm not an engineer, I'm a psychologist. At least I was trained as an experimental psychologist in Italy for 5 years. I ended up living and working for 20 years in the computer science and engineering department, so maybe I'm also half an engineer, I don't know. Not officially an engineer for the professional body, of course. You will see in my talk, but also the main vision behind my approach is to want to look at robots from 2 points of view. So when I sit in my School of Computing and Engineering department, then I have to say that I want to build robots, machines, which interact with people, in particular, which communicate with people. Primarily language, we are now doing work now also on non-verbal communication. But then when I sit with my whole heart of a psychologist, I really want to achieve, at least partially, the goal of using this robot as a model, as a computational model. So in psychology, we used to have rule-based systems, production rules, as models of cognition, cognitivist approaches, symbolic approaches, then neural network, connectionist. I started as a connectionist, and now we have this embodied approach. I like to call it embodied connectionism. That is, you embed neural networks as a model of cognition, of course, in a situated and embodied setup, which is the ICAP. Simulation of real, most of this is physical robot, but simulation also plays an important role. So you will see a continuous switch between the psychology, which is really what characterizes our approach, and what we believe is important and complements other methodological visions of the same cognitive robotics field and social robots. You will not see any emotion stuff, but I added a slide at the end, just to make it further relevant to the project. This is part of what we are doing now, adding emotion to our context. So we have now plenty of technologies for digital assistants, Alexa, Siri, and so on. So why are we bothered? Why do we want to do this? Of course, the context is that if we, rather than pre-programming a full corpus or lexicon in our machine with no real intrinsic understanding of the meaning and the context in which you use these words, if you don't do this, we can't really use robots. And we see robots in the context of social companions, emotional companions, so there should be some sharing of the meaning, grounded sharing of meaning. And therefore, if we look at this, we can see the limitations of using a purely symbolic or language NLP-based approach without the context. So if I ask Eliza, or even if I ask Pepper, if I connect Eliza to the ICAP, and we ask it the meaning of push, because they rely on dictionaries, or maybe on cloud computing, Wikipedia, links, and so on, they will give me nice definitions of verbs. So according to the American English Dictionary, Webster, push is defined in this symbolic and abstract way. So push, which is an easy concept in a robot, straightforward concept in a robot, is defined using language in this very abstract formal definition: to press forcefully against, to move, a very general definition. Now I want to challenge my Siri or my Pepper or any other system further, so tell me what you mean for force out of the many words, okay? So force is defined in the same dictionary, so Pepper will retrieve the same information of Siri, and will say force is defined as energy or strength. So we are happy, satisfied with the approach. So she really knows, Pepper, if she's a she, what she's talking about. So let's ask then the definition of energy, and you see when the problems start to appear. So energy is defined in the same dictionary as strength of force. And actually, when I have to translate from English in Italian, strength and force, I don't really know how to actually translate. But there must be some semantic differentiation there. But you see that one term defines the other, and then the other terms define itself. So, which, if I'm a robot and I'm trying to find this meaning to know what to do, it's going to be a problem. And you see just one or two links. You see, we are back to the same. So 1 degree of freedom, 2 degrees of freedom in terms of links, but we are lost in language or in symbols. So how do we avoid this? In addition to the previous approaches, we have another one, complementary one, which is to go beyond the idea of this Chinese room. So in a Chinese room, you can get a non-Chinese speaker in the middle, using mouse dictionaries to give meaningful replies, linguistically, but meaningless in the sense of the understanding. And when I do my longer talks in a summer school with students, I like to do the Chinese room experiment. So I ask students questions in Chinese, and they give me an answer. I know there is at least one Chinese speaker, this is Google Translate. Or a real set of definitions, but actually because we are not used to these symbols, we Europeans at least, we are used to these other characters. So I run this is SEC, it's my dialect in Sicily, which Italians would partially understand. So I talk Sicilian to my students, and they answer back to me meaningful questions about my aunt, my chicken, and what chickens like to eat and so on. So we can really have conversation without having a clue of the conversation. We don't want to do this, and we don't want our robots to do this. So how do we address this issue? This is my training in psychology. Talk to people that study this, and these are child psychologists, right? We are talking about learning to speak using language. We did this. We were babies. We had no clues. We were answering back babbling words without maybe meaning at the beginning, but gradually we acquired this. Also, we are not very efficient speakers from a developmental point of view, because it takes 18 months, 1.5 years, for a child, for us, to know maybe 10 words. Then there is something magic called vocabulary spurt. Magic in the sense you suddenly start to learn you add a word on a single presentation and so on. You will see examples of babies' experiments and robot experiments on this. So we don't send our babies, 1-month-old babies, to school to learn language, right? They learn language in the context of social interaction with peers and parents and so on. And you will see again another experiment where psychologists study this in detail in a systematic way. Our brain, which controls our behavior, is modular. We have vision here, language here, but it's not really modular if you look at the actual interactive functioning of these areas. And for example, among the many, Friedman-Pulver-Muller has demonstrated that the motor areas involved in actions like kick, lick, and pick are actually engaged in lexical decision tasks where you are not supposed to use or think of the meaning. And further, this is more recent research. When you learn, if you are a language learner, baby language learner, you have a concept of trust. Would you be learning from any of your teachers, or you would be starting to decide who to trust or not? Trust goes behind the concept here of language learning. We studied trust in one of the speakers referred to this, maybe Gerard, because if I have a very powerful robot that looks at me properly with all the arcades, I don't trust it, but we have developed knowledge. So for the human, what's the company name? So if you want to sell your systems, you want people to use them to have a value to what you sell, and therefore you must buy and use them rather than returning the service back maybe after a week. So how do we address this? The approach is called developmental robotics. Many of us actually do developmental robotics, so this is us together. Some of us typically fit one of these disciplines. Others, like me, are a bit more confused. They contribute to more of this. What matters is that we work with colleagues. And also, I think a lesson learned from the younger generation of students, we shouldn't pretend to be interdisciplinarity. Is not, at least there is a group in Plymouth that calls it transdisciplinarity. So working with other people and learning some methodology is very good, but we are still the experts in our field. So if I have to do experiments in psychology, even if I have a training in official Italian professional body affiliation in psychology, I'm not supposed to do this because for 20 years I haven't done experiments. So interdisciplinary means working and pairing with the experts, like we were talking for your project, for example. So it is very important rather than pretending I'm an expert in psychology, in robotics, and so on. This is a general training message. So in this field, many of you are, I'm sure you know my book. This is now an old book, 3-year-old. So today is very timely because if you buy Scientific America, this is our ICAP. It's not only about the work in Plymouth. Pierre Boudeyer was interviewed also, but these are the photos that they took in January in Plymouth. So we are in the news. 1st of March, going by the Scientific America. I don't know if there is a French version. We have an Italian version. I don't know if they translate it or not. But the English, which will be in bookstores near you from today, is there. Okay, so let's look at a series of snapshots almost of experiments. I will not go in much detail on the technology, but I will show you one architecture which again has commonalities with the first part of what Peter showed, using a Conan maps which are interconnected. And the approach, the first part will be on the language learning and then abstract concepts like numbers and further the theory of mind experiments. So the way we, in our interdisciplinary developmental robotics approach, we talk to the psychologists, we read the papers, and we have to simplify their knowledge. In this, for example, with a time scale or a series of milestones of what happens in child development. First year, perceptual, you learn to recognize that apples are part of the same category. Apples and pears create a higher order category of fruit and so on. We start to do some phonetic rearrangements. We adapt our phonetic speech and production to the language we are exposed to. And then finally, first 6 months of the second year, you learn the first few words, individual words, and then you vocabulary spurt, fast single word acquisition. Towards the end, second 2 or multiple word combination, simple, proto-syntactic almost, and then full syntactic production with age. And we map these, some of these milestones, depending on the actual collaboration, to, again, working with child psychologists, to some of these milestones, because we are the vision of growing our baby ICAP with these cumulative skills in the idea of developmental open-ended cumulative learning. We do this in collaboration with baby labs, child psychologists. So initially we are still working with Linda Smith in Indiana. We were lucky then to start working with Jessica Horst and Cathy Tumey, who joined Manchester University recently, so we are already discussing joint work. And also we have a baby lab in Plymouth amongst the many other collaborators. And you will see these as videos in a moment. So a single word, actually phonetics, no objects, no meaning, single word, visual exclusivity, and then complexity. So let's start with one example. It's an odd one now, but I think it's the nicest way to show the link. Plus, this is an experiment where we could actually predict, we modelers could tell psychologists, look, according to our ICAP behavior and its cognitive architecture, there is something you haven't really noticed. You should investigate this. Also, was our prediction verified in new baby experiments after our ICAP suggested the solution? So this is the experiment. To show the importance of actively engaging in a learning task with your body. So it's about space, left and right, but it's really the postural integration with space. So it's not, I'm not in an eye tracker, old eye trackers where I don't move. I must move, actually, as a child, I do move. So the child inside, the experimenter there, she's teaching names of objects, even when the object is not visible by the child at the moment it is named. So she will be careful never to say the name of the object, these two strange new objects, to the child when the object is going to be hidden in a package at some point. So first engage the child to 2 postural positions, left and right of the table, and consistency at least in the first experiment on these 2 experiments, on the 2 positions and the 2 objects. So one object always on the left, one object always on the right. And then at some point soon, she's going to hide the object, the one that we see on our left. Still interacting from the left attention field from the child. Look at the modi. So she names this object with a new word, of course. Then she shows the 2 objects, the child replays with the object, we activate, if you want, the motor memory of the 2 positions to make sure it's full engaged, activated. And she's going to, at the moment, mix the object in the middle and do test, which is the real test of understanding. Can you find me the mode? So you want to test if the child now recognizes the object, even if not in its original position. So to simplify the representation of the experiment, left and right, show them in turn, systematic position, hide the object, step 5, say the word, we show the object, test the child with the object in the middle, and for the law of statistics and good sense, 73%, the number of students, of children and so on, shows that statistically speaking, at this age, 18 to 24 months, when children are starting to produce individual words mostly, they can learn the association between an object which was shown previously, but in the same position previously, and the actual label. And to demonstrate it is about positions, postural positions, they redo the experiment where there is a 50% chance each object is shown to the child differently over time, and therefore if you do this 50% chance, there is no way the child can guess it. So this plus more experiments that they are conducted show the importance of this active postural engagement when you learn to name objects, including when you don't see the object being named within a specific temporal delay, of course. And many years ago, this was towards the beginning of our iTalk project, when we received our iCap, we started to use this strategy to teach the robot. In particular, we start from the easiest strategy called fast mapping, where you see the object, you name it at the same time, and you learn the association. And then, of course, we apply it, we call it the MODI setup. So Tony Morse shows us the two experiments, fast mapping first, and then MODI setup in a less controlled environment. So the iCap is pre-programmed to look at things that move. That's why Tony shakes the object. No, the gaze is very bad, Gerard, so you would fail this student at the iCap. No gaze at this stage. Of course, for us it's just a visual feedback to know that the program behind the robot is recognizing the specific object. The pointing or attempt to grasp, if you want, these are pre-programmed. The learning component here I will show you in a moment is really the associative learning, mediated by a body map, as I will show in a moment. So we make sure the two objects are learned when this what we did there, and now we have a replication of one of the conditions of this body setup.
Those objects don't have to be in sight, they be through association. So we'll show you how that works on the robot.
So you do some motion filtering to decide where to look. White means lots of movement is happening in this video. You show the object. Now look at Tony's hand. You shake your fingers to make sure the robot looks at the same postural position. And then you ask, of course, do the testing like you would do with a child in any position. So this is the demonstration of the experiment. The real data will be shown in a moment. They were published in a paper 2015. But this is the architecture, which is similar to the first part of Peter's one, in the sense that most of these blocks, the squares, are actually Conan maps pre-trained to do color recognition, shape recognition. We don't use Conan maps anymore for phonetics, but you can imagine a speech recognizer highlighting the Winneter call localist encoding of the word being selected. The key map is there. It's a postural Conan sum map of your body positions, postures, which with the Winneter call activation activating multiple modalities, and the learning happens between these heavy and associative connections, connecting the Winneter call nodes in all the modalities. And they are bidirectional, so you can get from word to object, you track the object, or from object you can, of course, name, from seeing the object, you can produce your, react by the name. In some cases directly, let's say color or shape to speech. In other cases, you are mediated by, initially at least, by your body. So you don't see the object, but you are in the same position. This activates a temporal associations, which later will become a full multimodal association. And this is the data from the paper. The two colors are the two experiments. And in these are the new experiments where we, with the iCap experiments, predicted this behavior. So robot data came first, and child data were verified after a few. It took actually a while for them, of course, to run the regular experiments. Here we show that in addition to left and right, you can modify vertical position. So with two competing orientations, you can actually learn in parallel two competing tasks. We eliminate the interference within the object. So you can put the object in the same location which in the switch was creating confusions, and the child robot, but also the real children can actually memorize. So that's the main real achievement of me as a psychologist, at least, to talk to the psychologist and say, oh, you can learn something from our models. Mostly the other way around, but you never know. So this is the collaboration afterwards with Cathy Toomey. She was doing a PhD in Sussex, in Brighton, and now we said she's in Manchester. So Cathy, you see her here, she studies mutual exclusivity. The child knows in advance aeroplane and train. So when she said, can you find me the chim? By mutual exclusivity, this is a phenomenon studied in child psychology, you don't even need to be taught the word. You imply, if you hear a new name and you see a new object, by exclusivity, you learn the association. This is a well-known phenomenon in psychology from the 80s. Why they are studying this now is because they want to study if you change the similarity of the categorization, when does the phenomenon break? So in all classical studies, you always use the same object to do this comparison. Then they start to modify the object by one dimension of variance, if you want, narrow variability. You change the color, exactly the same shape, change color, exactly the same shape, or 2 degrees of freedom if you want a variability. You change slightly the shape within the same category, of course, and you change the color. So when does it stop? So they did the conditions. Also, they came here in Plymouth, Kate, to run some experiments. So tomato and frog is pre-trained with the old technique that you saw in the previous video. Hats, this new word, new object, is learned by the robot by a gross representational case. The ICAP hands at the time were being upgraded to the screen in Genoa, so we were forced to use the communicative case, which is of course very good here today. So that's an example, and of course we do the experiments, which the key point is that not that the ICAP always does this, the ICAP only, or better, this cognitive architecture of associative knowledge maps perform the same behavior of children depending on the conditions that we know affect learning in child. So if you have 2 competitors and 1 new object, you can learn the association. You can show that you use mutual exclusivity. Instead, chance level. If you are at a level where the number of competitors increases, the child and the robot is called an associative learning architecture will stop doing the learning. And plus, we actually did with Kate more of extensions of this. This is just one of the results. In this case, the contribution of us roboticists to the psychologists wasn't really a specific prediction, was more a theoretical explanation of the learning mechanisms that children might use to this phenomenon. And then let's put everything together. One dream of developmental robotics is to go in the wild. You mentioned this, real world. No start or stop of the experiment. It's happening, your robot learns. We still learn, right? We're getting older, we still learn. So our ICAP here is growing. And here I'm going to give you some comments on the different strategies used in this learning task. So fast mapping, you see, you hear, at the same time, no ambiguity, you learn. So this is the first fast mapping. We just double test the robot with the cognitive architecture really. Then you start now to add mutual exclusivity for the easy condition, 1 competitor. So the robot knows box, so by mutual exclusivity, new object, new name, it must be this. Let's make sure you haven't forgotten, of course, you don't call everything the last label you hear. Now we added a recurrent component, so we do 2 word combinations here, color and name, with the order determined by the recurrent architecture. And the robot will produce in one specific order of confidence in this case. Now mutual exclusivity by shape, right? You learn the cap of the shape, Visual exclusivity by color.
Red.
And in a moment you will see some generalization, so you teach two new concepts. We have done an experiment that shows that recurrency allows you to use word order as a strategy to learn the two positions of the words. So you know green, you know leaf. Now we do mutual exclusivity. The only thing I know here is green. So I'm learning two new words. I'm learning the other object as a first position, which is the color, purple, and now second position, carton, the shape, because now you can start to do all the other testings. And this continues for a few extra minutes. This was towards the end of our iTalk project, a while ago now. I think it shows naturally the richness that you can get. Of course, richness from a developmental perspective. This is nothing to do with the human adult capability, but we don't want to get there yet together. At least this is our vision. What I showed you was mostly on in word learning, visual word learning. We have done more work on kinesthetic imitation. I don't remember who mentioned this. Here, now with the Baxter also using reservoir computing again to do first action learning and then start to label these actions and perform some kind of implicit, let's say, verb-noun in the loose sense combinations. I cannot show you these or talk about these models because of time, but I refer to the papers and some of the pictures and videos here. Because I only have another 12 minutes and I have to show you a bit more. So this is relatively more recent work published in 2014, which is how, and this is really my challenge. So if any of you gets to referee a grant proposal or abstract words, you know why this is important, because it's between colleagues. So my new direction of research is going from concrete words, which is easy, to abstract concepts. So how do I teach a child robot the concept of one? So if I use visual strategy, this is one, black and with this shape, this is one person, right, nothing in common. We are one group, perceptually really not in common. We live in one planet, we can go further higher. This is just for numbers. And the same applies to use. I can use a pen, I can use a brush, motorically not much in common. I can use a plan, I can use an idea. So you see we can go towards complexity. So this is the vision. How can we try to address this vision? One approach is to look again at child psychology. How do we teach children about learning numbers? That's what we do. We engage them in physical activities, finger counting, pointing, and so on. So let me focus just on one study. You can refer to the other papers later. This is on finger counting. So a robot is trained, 3 types of robots, to only do this in silence, or to do this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you do this, you will see in a moment you can even perform proto-addition. You can combine 2 sequences to create what we will call, I call it proto-sum. Also, if we visualize the link, the similarity of the number concept within the brain of the robot in this condition, number sequence only, and in the condition where you do together, embodied approach, you can see the numbers, except for some mistakes, are actually there in an order which is what we think it's numerical cardinality order. If you are a robot who can bubble any sequence, you don't have a clue in terms of representation of the similarity of the numbers. And again, no time to discuss this in detail. Peter said something nice, there is a mistake here. We didn't analyze the pattern of mistakes in detail. Children, they can perform a perfect task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without producing any mistakes. Actually, in their internal representation, they still confuse some of the numbers. So 5 is an 8 and 6. 8 and 6 is closer, and then maybe what we should have is 6 closer to 7 and 6 closer to 8. We haven't really analyzed this. So this is another component, just one of the examples. We have done work and published recently on use to write, use a pen to go towards this direction. And then the conclusion will be a new experiment, relatively new. This is a project funded by the US on trust. The 2 directions of trust. Can I, person, in a human-robot interaction setup, trust my robot? But also, can I, robot, trust my teacher, my human teacher, my master? Which is what we are going to focus on now. We have done work on the 2 directions. And here, how do you build a theory of mind a simplified theory of mind that the robot has of the human teacher to know whom to trust. So what we do, we take, let me skip this, we are pure developmental psychologists, I say, so we talk to psychologists, what do you know about trust in children? And we were lucky to there are two main approaches. One is called the Sally-Ann task. You hide the objects which were modeled with the paper, but here I chose to show you the language learning because we show you the first part of the talk on language learning. So now you will have a teacher which is teaching via fast mapping object names. How can you trust the teachers? And this is what Paul Harris from the Netherlands has studied in preschool children. Two types of reliable and unreliable teachers. The theory of mind architecture here using a belief network, dynamic belief network. This is a methodology which one of you guys actually mentioned. So because of time, I can only show you the video. So there are three people here. Let's say the parent, who is the gray t-shirt, Massimiliano De Hai, who is doing the work, who first teaches the basic truth, a series of objects, fast mapping, which the robot will keep in its it's called the EAD architecture, this cognitive architecture.
This is a dog.
Now the red t-shirt guy, which is the bad guy, teaches the wrong name, so the robot is updating its theory of mind of this guy as the guy who is not reliable, because the robot has its own ground truth for cap.
Yes, it is.
The blue shirt lady, the nice one, is consistent, so the robot says, oh, blue or face recognition we also do.
This is a donut.
Now, if the red guy gives you a name for this object, and then in parallel, a different person with a different reputation, if you want, teaches you a different name, we show that the robot can rely on this theory of mind of the two speakers when the parent, the gray guy, comes back.
What is this?
I think this is a dance.
To show that you can actually use this and combine this for language learning. And in another study with the paper, we actually show this Sally-Ann task, which is a slightly different one. More classical theory of mind experiments, child psychology experiments. In that context, we actually look also at episodic memory. That's a collaboration with Antonio Kella from Palermo. He's an expert on consciousness and machines. And now that we are getting old, we were saying with Peter, we have started to do work on consciousness, which I didn't want even to hear about it before. So no video, no time to show you the video, I'm afraid. There are a few of you, I understand, who are more on the other side of the trust. It is how can we test and increase people's trust of the technology. So in experiments, which is very relevant, we use two different tasks. But we have manipulated, amongst the other things, a social gaze. So you have a robot who gazes randomly versus the other one who gazes at the object and the person during the interaction. When they are playing a prize game judgment or an investment game, you invest virtual money to show how this is important, how this changes towards time. We have also done comparisons on different morphological representations with the humanoid winning, the competition for trust. But also there is a priming effect. If you see first the eye gap, and then you see these less humanoid robots, you prime a behavior, which then goes into contrast, and you analyze the dynamics, which are different. This is on papers, I'm afraid I have no time, I have 1 minute left, so I can answer questions on this, but I decided to select the learning side of it for my talk. Now let me summarize, these are the pictures of my experience. Let me summarize by reflecting on what I think we have achieved, which is what you should remember as a take-home message, but then you will see I'm going to ask a question on emotions, at least my potential contribution to adding emotions. There are no emotions up to now in this approach. So if we look at what has been achieved, we can say that using this developmental approach and this embodiment approach, you can exploit the cues from embodiment, for example, posture position, to enrich your skills. You can learn the object name when you don't see the object at the time it's named, or you can use, as we said, different dimensions of movement to learn two completed tasks at the same time, simply by attaching each task to a different postural positions. We have looked at many phenomena, right? There are many strategies used by children when they learn language, not only one, fast mapping, visual exclusivity, and we show that they can be combined together in this cumulative approach. And more recently, we started to add a component of trust and theory of mind. Of course, there is still a lot to do, our work is still toy in the sense we don't look at the complexity of the lexicon, we don't teach the child thousands of words. We are now working towards not only gestural communication, but also the meaning of words, abstract words, actually they are called function words, like demonstrative, this and that. How can a robot ground in its experience the meaning of these function words? And of course, we all are doing this. We are then applying this to real world setup, mostly in my lab with the elderly, but my colleague Tony Belpalme, for example, works in children tutoring via robotics. And you should have asked me what about emotions. When I looked again, paid attention to the title of the workshop, I said, "Oh, am I in the right place?" Yeah, I'm in the right place because we have done work recently on emotional recognition. I'm afraid I have to apologize. We will discuss deep learning in a moment, using deep learning, which is very good, but maybe it's a bit too good. I'll explain why later. So we have done classical face recognition with CNN. More recently, an Erasmus student did work on group emotions. So there is a competition when you go to these conferences, and we show that by combining together the Bayesian approach of the theory of mind adapted to this context here, and our deep learning system, you can then predict the overall mood or emotion of a group, which again, we are used, when I saw the demos, what I do. When you think of emotion, you think one-to-one emotions, but actually there might be maybe a social component of emotions, right? If we have a sad group of people, why do you bother making an individual happy? You need to understand, oh, there is something sad in a group, so what I need to do is different. Maybe I need to be sad myself rather than changing the emotion of an individual. And we are actually, I'm writing these days, 14th of March is the deadline, a UK Royal Society and Cherokee Tubitak Research Councils for a fellowship with a lady, Elena Pattini-Sommers, who did the work on the CNN to add a developmental perspective. So it's perfect timing to start to do something in the field. But this is if we get the money, of course, which is never easy. And with this I can conclude by saying that we, all the professors go around, give talks, while our real people are doing the work in the lab. Sometimes we bring people around also. So thank you, and let's acknowledge the founders, of course, and the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo, for the talk. Sorry for to interrupt you for the timing. Is there any questions?
So it's very interesting work. This notion of trust and theory of mind, so you're, to be the devil's advocate, I could say, well, so you've got a system that can detect whether people are giving consistent or inconsistent information based on what I know, and then I just tag, each individual is tagged with the value of this consistency, and so, yeah, you could kind of reduce and say, well, that's not really a theory of mind, that's just reliability. And so it's kind of like a parameter, a reliability parameter. And so, yeah.
So I can answer this very good point. When we published the paper, the other papers on trust, this is the criticism, so we have to change the word trust to, don't remember. There are different components of trust. Actually, personally, I disagree. Some people say, to have trust, you need to have a risk component, which might be true, or it's true maybe in most of the literature. So this is debatable. I agree with you, but this is the starting point.
Sure.
So in the paper work with this episodic memory of when you achieved this trust level or this reliability level, we actually use this then to project your trust and adapt your trust to new people that you see for the first time. So there is a component of this. For the follow-up studies, the follow-up grant, US grant, which starts in January 19, is exactly in theory of mind. So they will look at many more dimensions, including going towards this risk component. So to imply trust, you imply that if I don't trust you, I lose something. Mm-hmm. While in this case, maybe you don't lose anything if you learn the wrong word. Or maybe actually there might be a risk.
Because theory of mind often implies that you get some representation already of self, and that you've got a representation that the other, who I'm assuming a theory of mind about this other one, is somehow isomorphic to me, with data structures that become quite
Yeah, you map to yourself.
Complex.
So in this first study, no.
D'accord.
In the new 5-year program, then we are looking also at this.
Okay.
Sorry, for the trust experiment, I didn't get the rule of the robot itself from the experiment. I mean, does it contribute to the interaction with the human or the robot itself, or?
So and every time the teacher tells you something which you know is right, I call it cap. You know it cap. It should be cap. Then you update your parameter of this Bayesian network. In such a way, you adapt your learnings if you want your parameters of this Bayesian network for each of you have a different network for each of your interacting agents. And then when you match the individual by the color of the shirt or later by the face, you recall you activate your Bayesian learning association according to your trust parameter.
The question was about embodiment. But what's very important to you? Why robots?
I see. But in this case, let's assume we are in the line of research, which is you teach a robot to learn with different strategies. Okay. In this case, you add a component which you trust. So in this sense, yes. Yeah, I would say the approach here cannot be taken on its own as a demonstration that embodiment is essential to acquiring a theory of mind, or at least a simplified theory of mind of your user, if this is what you mean. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't stress this much.
Are you taking ontology into account, for instance, for the trust also, because you can have one person that called banana, and the other one will say fruit. It's not that one is wrong, it's just one is using another one that is somehow relevant. And it's also the case, like if you have the green cup or the red cup, you can have one that says it's a cup and the other one it's a kitchen tool. So how this ontology is blurring a bit?
So in this case, it really refers only to it's a single word, it's experiment, so it's easy because we don't have this problem. If you were to go into this dimension, of course, yes, you will need to add maybe a continuum assessment of how wrong you are. Plus, you could also use a confidence level of your prediction, because if I know an association, I have a confidence level in the activation of my, what they call nodes, which you could use as a measure of your own confidence. So when you are not sure, is it you who has a low confidence parameters? Yeah, for instance. The video you see snapshots. In the experiments, you interact with with the two red and blue people more than once. You update these parameters. So again, in a paper which we are writing, we are comparing a case in which you are 100% reliable, A, person B is 0% reliable, versus 50-50. We are analyzing the parameter space.
Any other question? We have time for one or two more. No, so I have one. For the various models that you presented, you switch from self-analyzing maps to deep learning, and even say that deep learning is too good at the end. And you also show that there is different type of capability for the endpoints. Is deep learning adding something to the property of your model and maybe some kind of matching between the area that can be just included in your cortex for the endpoint, or is that only?
You're opening the discussion for this afternoon. So let me say this, deep learning is great, that's why we are also using it. From a developmental point of view, a child is not a CNN who is exposed to millions of instances serially until you get it right. A child uses different strategies. Of course, repetitions are happening, but you get this one-shot learning, but also you get learning from simple experiments, you get a scaffolding. Once you learn something, it's easier to get vocabulary spurt. Because vocabulary spurt, you have to go through slower learning. So if we believe on this developmental approach, then deep learning doesn't really offer this methodological tool. This is one element. Then why do we use it? First, we use it because all the students now want to have in their CV. Let's be honest. All my students, one way or the other, propose to add a deep learning component. I warn them, but most of them are using it. They are very useful tools. They are powerful tools. So you could, you could remove the icon, remove the body, do a, object. There are this famous deep learning method that do object recognition. You could add the labeling of the objects. Is this really a developmental system, and how you link it to your body and so on. So there isn't a wrong or right answer. I'm anticipating in some way the discussion. My only concern is that I think we are converging too much. If we train all our PhD students to all do this deep learning, there are lots of deep learning varieties. What if we realize that this is going to we say vicolo cieco in Italian, to a place without a name. So I'm not against it because we use it, they're useful, but we have to be a bit more careful. We old people have a bit more experience on these hypes.
Yeah, I think I got your point on the learning strategies, many of different strategies, but I'm not sure I get the why. I mean, why do you give those learning strategies? Because if you are talking about the child, there are some motivations that are in his DNA. What's the DNA of a robot? Why would he learn?
So our DNA is hand-coded. You learn because I tell you to learn. Activate your behavioral association whenever you say this, something, you stop the speech, the program say this starts the weight update, where doesn't do any learning. So we do this by hand. Of course, you could add PLE with a year, but many other people that do intrinsic motivation. I think, realistically, in each lab or in each experiment, you need to say, I take this from the literature, as it is given, and I focus on this aspect. If you want to do everything, you will never maybe reach a level of complexity, which is, but of course, it's very, in a real autonomous learning system, it's not only why you learn, but also when do you stop learning? You keep teaching me the thing, do I have to relearn something, or do I just ask you to teach me another name?
Okay, so last one, please.
So I just want to continue on your question, but not argue for deep learning. But would you argue that learning itself, apart from CNN, the way we learn at this moment, like by looking at passive images, this is in particular a problem. With the children, yes, we can argue that children are not CNNs, but children have much more access to the environment. They can manipulate the environment. They can look at the glass from different point of views. Would you, maybe my question is not very clear, but would you, for example, say that the way we learn, this is a main issue, the main limitation that we have at this moment?
Definitely yes. And plus, I would add that by adding all these components, you will probably get to a level of complexity which we cannot reach if we do this. I accept the criticism which I give to myself. These are toy models. So if you really had a real robot who has to have a real conversation with you, this wouldn't be enough. Okay. So there is one shortcut: do this deep learning or use Alexa, and Alexa will talk to you. But I bought an Alexa. I have decided I'm going to save some electrical energy, because when to use the Alexa for? So it's a combination of things. Of course, we are making here a bet, because the same criticism I give to deep learning, you can give it to developmental robotics. It could be a hype. In 5 years' time, no one is going to do developmental because it's too slow. It doesn't achieve good learning. So we are making the wrong choices. So this is true, but so what I'm advocating is don't put all the money in developmental robotics or in deep learning, or that's how science works. And then there will be the big revolutions, and it might be that in 10 years' time, it's all deep learning. It's a bit strange for me because I used to be a connectionist. I had to defend the use of neural networks. Now I'm almost going against it.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks, Angelo, again.